This podcast is dedicated to the memory of Joyce Moyer. It's hardly a fitting tribute, but without her, I wouldn't be doing any of this silly stuff. If you've enjoyed any of the podcasts we've put out over the years, and if you can, please consider donating to Parkinson's UK. Thank you. You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Welcome to First Contact, Imagine Radio, but for the socially awkward. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This time we are watching Nth Degree. It was written by Joe Minosky and directed by Robert Legato. It first aired the week of April 1st, 1991. James, what happened in this one?
Remember Barclay? He was more entertaining than most of the series regulars, so when you come up with a good story, you might as well give it to him. While out repairing the Argus array, Reg gets knocked out by a weird space ray from a probe, but quickly recovers. He's not the same after, displaying intelligence, insight, and confidence. But as his intelligence increases, as does his insubordination, eventually he hooks himself up to the computer via the holodeck and becomes the computer. His goal is to transport the ship across the galaxy, but what awaits the Enterprise when it arrives? Why, it's a big floaty head.
Well, Alex, you'd never seen this episode before. What did you think of it?
Well, it's a sequel, and I guess it does what a lot of sequels do, which is take what the original did and then subvert it in some way. So you have the original Barclay episode being, oh, look at him, he's pathetic, and then reverse it this time and, oh, look, he's a genius, and how's everyone going to react that now this person that they spent an episode, really being dicks to, now they have to respect him, but oh, is he going too far? And all of that bollocks. Like most sequels, though, is it as satisfying as the first? Probably not, but it carries enough goodwill from the first one that it doesn't really matter. I could thoroughly see someone really latching onto this episode and enjoying it. Well, that sounds bad. Really loving this episode, perhaps is a better way of putting it. I would say it's fine. It doesn't perhaps elevate above the episode that it's a sequel to, for me, though.
I think it's, again, much like last week with Identity Crisis, although I think this is the better episode of the two. It's a very confident episode. Barclay is a better character than Geordi. I don't think there's really much doubt about that, because he's got more places he can go, because he is low to start with, so you can take him and put him on the holodeck where he is getting to act out his fancies of being a hero, and then I guess in this one he gets to become these things. He gets to fulfill his potential in a very specific way and become a super genius. So I think this is a good story, and I certainly enjoyed it.
There are parallels to be had between Geordi and Barclay. They're both quite socially inept at times, but I think
both sex pests.
Well, Geordi has misplaced confidence, and Barclay just needs more. You know, he is a smart guy. He is capable. He just needs that confidence boost. And the issue with the previous episode, Hollow Pursuits, is he didn't have that confidence boost from the people around him. In fact, he was getting openly mocked by Wesley, of all people. Whereas, you know, in this situation, I almost feel bad for him that he's only gaining the confidence through an alien influence. But it does have that nice coda to it that maybe some of it stays with him.
Well, it's like Red Dwarf, isn't it? It's like Hollow Ship. You feel sorry that the only way that Rimmer's able to achieve his goal of joining the ship that he wants is through a mind patch that makes him super intelligent when he can never sustain it. there's certainly something in what you were saying, Andrew, that this is the better episode, and that you're more interested in Barclay. I'm thoroughly more invested in Barclay than I was in Geordie in the previous episode. In the previous episode, Geordie is just there. It's just almost like a character void, whereas this episode doesn't work with a different character in the same way. The character is central to the plot, which seems like such an obvious statement to make, but it's a weird comparison with the previous weeks in terms of how audience engagement takes place.
I think with Identity Crisis, and we spoke about it during the episode, that could have been any character they did that episode with, and you could substitute, and they did. They brought in a random guest star to have a lot of the story, and then they have Geordie having the story, and you think, well, you could have done this with Troy, you could have done this with Riker, but this is a Barclay episode, and I think maybe you could do it with someone else, but you need the character who isn't super confident and who isn't already sort of seen as a genius, which is none of these characters in TNG. They're all hyper competent, which is not great for telling stories at times. So it's very useful to have a character, and it might be annoying for a lot of the cast to be saying this guy comes in once a season and gets a really interesting story, but it's because all of the regular characters are just good at their jobs and completely perfect in social situations and sort of just a bit annoyingly nice. So it's really useful to have this character there in the background to use when you want to tell a particular story.
It's a problem for the showrunners that this guest character, who's only been in it twice, has a more definable character than probably at least two of the regulars at this point.
And O'Brien does as well.
Yeah.
And he's not a regular.
No. He's a bit bored by his work, and he's occasionally annoyed with his wife for not eating mutton. And you're right. That is more of a character than Geordie.
It's the issue with the Gene Roddenberry kind of perfect universe, isn't it? That every single character has to be great at their job. And this is the flagship, so everybody has to be the best of the best, even though, let's face it, at times they're not. But it almost feels quite quaint that they do keep Barclay around. That, he's clearly not, only because of his social interactions, he's not good enough, but they believe that they can get this better person out of him. I think that's quite a noble message for the future, that they don't cast him aside, they keep him on. And we see here Geordie invites him onto the away mission because he just wants to get the best out of him.
I think as well, you do have a bit of an arc from the previous episode, and that's used with the Cyrano de Bergerac play at the start of the episode. So they have showed he is interacting with the crew. He has started acting. He's taking lessons from Dr. Crusher, of all people.
Yeah, when was that a thing? She does ballet, she does acting. Is she ever doing any doctoring? I
don't know. She grows little mold spores. Who knows what she does? But we've got to come up with stuff for these actors to do. So
she can ride a unicycle as well, can't she?
She can, yeah. There's videos. Very specific sites. But I think this is so clever because it is moving the character forward and showing, look, he is doing these new things. And actually, in that scene, I didn't notice this until I was back on reading about Hollow Pursuits. Troy at the play is wearing the outfit she wears in his holodeck fantasy. So I thought that was quite a nice touch. But so you get that just to show he's come on, but also he's not come on that much because he's terrible and he's awkward and his performance is quite stilted. But that's just such a good vehicle then for later on in the episode coming back to that and him doing a virtuoso performance. And it's such a good example of showing and not telling. And sure, it is very structured, but I just thought, I can't imagine any of the modern Star Trek shows doing something this on the nose, because they don't, but just this
silly,
this interesting, and this silly, and this well done, that it reveals that much about a character through something like this. And I just really liked that element of it.
I mean, it's a good performance, but he's no John Nettles.
Yeah. So I guess let's talk about the Argus array. I like a nice model, don't you?
Yes, the model works quite nice in this episode, isn't it? It feels like a little while since we've had some good quality models.
Yeah. So a big space telescope, I quite like that. And then we've got a probe, which sort of slightly reminded me of the probe out of Star Trek 4. It's a nice bit of kit.
There's a big, gigantic, smooth cylinder in the voyage home, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a smooth cylinder with a little circle, but it's a probe in space, and that reminds me of other things.
They seem to feel that the Argus array is incredibly important, don't they?
Yes.
It feels like it's a person held hostage, that they're that worried about it.
Well, I mean, if you don't have Argus, I don't know where any of them are going to get their Christmas presents.
I was just thinking that the Argus array is maybe how I should start referring to the laminated Book of Dreams. Except, oh no, they're discontinuing it, aren't they?
It's gone.
It's all online, I'm afraid.
I'm 30 years behind my deadline for that joke.
It was fine in 1991. It was a good joke then.
Cutting edge, in fact.
You'll struggle to find an Argos outside the Sainsbury's.
Sad times.
It's alright, there won't be any shops left at the end of coronavirus. It'll just be people trading photos on OnlyFans for food.
Yeah, so I guess it's very slight, isn't it? That it's not really a B plot, but I guess what the Enterprise is doing this week plot, which is fixing a telescope, and Barclay has an idea to fix it better. It is all it needs to be, because this is essentially a character episode, and so we don't even find out about the telescope in the end. I was really disappointed.
No, I mean, it could be anything that they're doing, frankly. The one thing I would say is, let's be grateful it's not like a few weeks back, and that the B plot to the Barclay episode is space infanticide. Because that would be a tonal shift.
Again, like you said with last week, it does exactly what it needs to do to tell the story. Maybe the bare minimum on that count, but you get some nice model shots out of it. You get a little trip out in the shuttle, which adds a bit of texture. You get a probe in space. You get an explosion. So that's all fine, and I am quite happy with that.
Yeah, as long as the main plot is strong enough, it genuinely doesn't really matter that the B plot is slight. It's purely there to serve a function, and as long as your main plot's strong enough, who cares, frankly? The problem comes when your plot isn't strong enough, and then you become too reliant on the B plot, and then we end up spending a lot of time with Geordi and Data building log cabins out of matchsticks.
I guess that there's a couple of kind of comedy set pieces in this. So you have the Einstein scene, which I think is, it's obviously there. It's a shorthand for a joke in that he has got incredibly clever, but it does what it does. It's good fun. I like seeing that sort of thing. And then I guess you have the acting scene, which shows his emotional intelligence, and you've got the Troy strand where he is. I wouldn't say he's pursuing her in a creepy way. It seems like a sort of respectful and reasonable conversation.
Seems like an embarrassment, really.
Yeah, I mean it's not great, but again, I think in this episode and this relationship, which will build in Star Trek Voyager, I like the Troy Barclay pairing. I think it gives her something different to do rather than being woken in the night by some kind of space probe.
I think if you think that in the previous episode where we saw Barclay, he was creating holodeck illusions of Troy to be romantically involved with. That makes it a bit weird, but you can also consider that they're now on friendly terms, and they do establish that well enough to mean it's not quite as creepy as it could have been if he was making a pass at it right at the start of the episode.
But he's also not overtly sleazy, I guess, with the pass. He's just sitting there, he's doing his work, and then he offers to go for a walk in the Arboretum, which I guess is a nice enough offer.
Is that slang in the future?
That's where Keiko does her best work.
O'Brien is always wanting to go for a walk in the Arboretum.
Must we always go for a walk? Can't we eat some mutton?
Oh no. Do you think they play the comedy enough before the kind of dramatic "I have become the villain" moment? Do you think they space that out? Is there anything more you think they could have done with Barclay's confidence and his growing intelligence, or do you think they play that in those 3 scenes for all it's worth, and then they can just get on with the plot, I guess?
I think it's a fine line, because when you are trying to make him a threat in the latter half of the episode, you can't play it too comedic in the first half, because then you're undermining having a threat at all. So I think they probably play it about as far as it can go. I think instead of some of the humour that you would have used in his first appearance, I think playing it more into the embarrassment here is probably the sensible way to go.
The one I didn't mention as well is that Riker scene where he says, "Explain how you did it, Reg," and then he does, and he goes, I see. I really like them playing Riker as a stupid man who doesn't understand anything. That's funny. Actual good use of Riker. I think we said it about other characters recently, that the writers are increasingly taking the piss out of the characters that they've kind of been lumbered with, and just really playing into the cliches about them. And I think Riker, his arc essentially completed in the Best of Both Worlds, is absolutely ripe for that.
And also the perfect character to link into this plot because of Riker's links with Troy. This is exactly what we were saying was absent from the last episode. Something where the character drives the narrative. And then their relationships with other characters then drive the surrounding plots. That's what this episode excels in doing, to be honest with you, that the previous episode just didn't.
And it does lead to the lovely line of Riker being a bit jealous about Barclay maybe having made a successful pass at Troy.
Yeah, everything that is set up is paid off. They play, I think, everything just to the right level in this episode, so it all goes together to create a nicely entertaining piece, and it's sort of TNG on fairly light and silly mode. I think anyone who says it doesn't do comedy, show them that Barclay acting scene, or even show them the scenes towards the end of it. But so I guess let's build towards the crescendo of the episode. Again, a return to the holodeck, I guess, the natural home of Barclay. So again, it's tying in it as a piece, and him basically becoming the Enterprise, building an interface with the computer, which is quite a prop. Like, as a silly sci-fi prop, like I think this is great. This is exactly what I want to see.
Oh, it took me back to when I was 7, and I thought, oh god, it reminds me of VR troopers or some such crap program like that. All the lasers going off, so futuristic.
Love lasers. But yeah, I am absolutely fine with that, and I think Dwight Schultz's performance as well, though, when he's just sitting there looking and his voice is just coming out of nowhere.
It was very 2001.
I was surprised that they didn't play on that more, actually. When Geordie's trying to evade him, I genuinely thought for a moment, oh, they're going to go into some sort of Hal parody here, and they didn't. I can't decide if it's better for having avoided the obvious joke or not, really.
I don't feel Star Trek tends to reference other pop culture very much, though. So...
Well, hey, you should watch Star Trek Lower Deck. I hasten to add, I've not seen an episode. I'm just taking a guess, but I'm willing to bet it's a fairly accurate guess.
You're the worst kind of fan. You're just making judgments without ever seeing things.
Oh no, it's great.
He manages to be sinister, so it doesn't underplay the drama too much, such as it is, and it makes sense as an arc as well, because I want to prove to you that I am better than this. I want to prove to you that I can do something that no one has ever done before, as well as being the agenda of the aliens. So it all makes sense from a character point of view, and then we have this sort of sequence of them being sucked through, I can't even remember, some kind of man-made anomaly, a graviton beam, a wormhole, don't know what you want to call it, which is a bit like the sort of warp sequence in Star Trek The Motion Picture. Slightly slow mode close-ups and shaky cam.
I would say, just in terms of that element of the plot, it would be very easy to do an episode where you're purely playing on the interpersonal effects of him becoming more intelligent without introducing that threat element. And I think that one thing that this episode does very well is to introduce a threat element, because if you had just gone down that interpersonal route and kind of had the same ending but without that threat of being sucked off across the galaxy, as you say, if you hadn't had that part, it would have been very much a replay of the first Barclay episode, I think, but just with everything reversed. I think introducing that threat element just elevates it into being something a little better rather than a really cheap and obvious sequel. I mean, where we end up with, is obviously very slight floaty space head, old man. It kind of comes to nothing, but let's be honest, by that point, you don't really care. At that point, you're just waiting for it to wrap up.
It's hand-waved away that they're gone for about a week, 30,000 light years away from home. Do you think in that week that they're suddenly going in the Alpha Quadrant? Hang on a minute, the Enterprise D has been missing for a bit, hasn't it?
Yeah, I guess that's
just glad to be rid.
That's not the story, but I do want to talk about the big floating head, the Cytherian aliens. I mean, this is a comedy ending, isn't it? This is them taking the piss out of Star Trek, the original series as well as early TNG. Just a big floaty head, all powerful alien,
just ignoring what's said, just rambling on their own accord. I mean, it's kind of like FaceTiming a family member during COVID. I think we can all relate during these times. Yeah, it's silly, and it's kind of that fallback into comedy again. Having had the threat element, we're returning, and returning to the equilibrium of where we started, more or less, and it's fine.
But I also I think it's a very Star Trek thing to have the alien who is, we are seeking knowledge, we want to exchange ideas. What was the threat, what was the peril, actually turns out to be just a misunderstanding and another chance to meet new life and new civilizations. So it comes back to a core Star Trek idea at the end.
This week's threat: lazy aliens. They won't come to you.
So yeah, I think overall, kind of a nice vehicle for Dwight Schultz. I don't know how many more times that you can come back to the character and do more with them.
Yeah,
but
this kind of feels like they've wrung as much as they can out of it.
Well,
I say that with the almost certain knowledge that there's something else to come, and they'll piss away all of that goodwill. But for now, I'm happy, I think. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some other minutiae in Quickfire.
So we rush back to Memory Beta to try and find if the novels or the comics or the games have carried on the story of the Nth Degree. And it turns out they have. The Cytherians made a return. I'm sure you're excited to find. It turns out they had a novel in which a rogue group of Cytherians set up 8 superintelligent delegates around the Alpha Quadrant, and they had to be stopped, and that's about it, really. It's not really a good use of the Cytherians, really. They're good guys. Why turn them bad?
Because reference. You remember these things?
It's a Star Trek novel, so it has to be a reference. Do you remember the Gorn? Do you remember them?
Do you remember space?
Remember Star Trek? Live lasers, you wouldn't get that these days, were used in the scenes where Barclay interfaces with the computer. Michael Biller said, "We've used laser beams in post-production for firing things and lighting effects, and we've had several meetings where I've wanted to use them in production, but we've never done it. Rob suggested it in this episode, and it was a wonderful idea. All those beams coming down and hitting his head are all laser beams and mirrors. It's all live. It's another effect we want to use more of." Well, I certainly look forward to seeing that. Lasers.
Like a very low-budget Pink Floyd concert. Turning to the arse-numbing atrocities of the Nitpicker's Guide, I mean, I think generally, as a rule, a relatively good episode. Phil, like us, has not a huge amount to say, unless there's something a bit lechy in it, in which case he can find some creepy comment to make. He doesn't in this one, so that's perhaps telling the episode.
That's very surprising, considering.
Well, yeah, you would have thought that it might be possible. So perhaps it shows good writing that he was not able to find an angle. But he does, however, comment on what he thinks is a great line from the episode. Great lines. The one that he's chosen is fair, I suppose, which is Troy's, "This isn't fantasy, it's theatre," when she encourages him if he wonders if trading holodeck fantasies for acting has really improved his situation. I mean, fine, I wouldn't say it's groundbreaking, but he does offer some commentary on that, where he says, "This is actually a very interesting line, considering that it's spoken by an actress performing in a television series about the 24th century to an actor just after he performed a scene from a play written in the 19th century. God, it's almost as if he's read the script.
Amazing. It's those sorts of insights that we could just never come up with.
But then, again, at £7.99 a book, I think I'd give it a bloody good go.
This is the second time that the Enterprise has been thrown halfway across the galaxy. Q.
Only the second?
Q sent them to the Borg before, but they've managed to get back within a reasonable amount of time every time, yet Voyager took 7 years. I mean, Just ridiculous.
That's the problem with having... I'm not going to go there now.
Now, they say that this is at the Galactic Center, but didn't the Enterprise A go there in Star Trek V? So, are they going to meet God? Was that God? Is that a joke about God?
God is just an alien life form in the Star Trek universe.
It's true. What would he want with a starship? Jim Norton, who appears as Einstein here, will appear again on the holodeck with Data in Descent. Well, that's us done for another episode. Next time we will be talking about Cupid.
I wonder what that one could be about.
Who knows? You can never tell. Oh, I think I've noticed a trend with the Q episodes, actually. They have a Q in the title. I bet no one's ever spotted that before.
That's coincidence.
Weird. We hope you will join us for that one. But until then, goodbye.
Goodbye.
I mean, we say we hope. We don't really care.
It doesn't really matter to us at all.
To be perfectly
No.
honest, yeah. Goodbye. I mean, it's a good performance, but he's no John Nettles.
Who is?
Well, John Nettles, presumably.
Oh, that makes sense.
Typecasting forever. I think I probably owe Steve Coogan and Armando Iannucci a $5 for that joke.
It's a Bergerac reference to our American listeners. Did you know he wasn't allowed to retire on Jersey because they've got a very strict admissions policy? After all he did for them.
Oh, sorry, I thought you meant the character. You mean the actor?
Yeah, no, the actual actor, John Nettles, wanted to move to Jersey. But
does he only choose his location for retirement based on his previous acting work? Did he then try Midsummer?
He did, and he was very disappointed to find out that it didn't exist. And that his character had been replaced by the same character. It was his cousin in the show, wasn't it?
I mean, they couldn't have chosen an actor that looked more sort of vaguely like the actor that they were replacing as well. You know, just sort of like the sort of Fawlty Towers dining experience, Basil Fawlty equivalent to John Cleese. Just about close enough. Yeah, I guess that's like John Nettles. Fine.
That'll do.
50 quid, please.
Budget John Nettles.